Hello everyone. Now I will show you the three forms of the engraved seals. The first is called Zhuwen, with red characters on a white background, or we call it Yangwen. The second is called Baiwen, with white characters on red background, or we call it Yingwen. The third is a blend with both red and white characters. That is, a blend of Zhuwen and Baiwen, or a blend of Yin and Yang. We will see Zhuwen and Baiwen in the following practices and demonstrations. There are two styles for the blend case. In the Han Dynasty, there was a kind of seal with a hole in the middle like this. We can find characters on both the front side and back side, and a hole in the middle between the two sides for a cord. There we find seals on both sides. For instance, there was a guy named Zhang Ping. On the front side it's read Zhang Ping seal, and on the back side it's read Chen Ping. The official seals all had the character Chen, which means the officer. So on the back side the characters Chen Ping is a blend case in both red and white. And we have some special cases that the characters are difficult to do with. Well, suppose we met a guy named Li Yi, for instance, which is a very simple name. And we have to write quite a few strokes for the surname Li, but Yi just has a single line. So there will be the imbalance between the white side and the red side, which is not very good. So we have to make Li a white character and Yi just a red line. And now it looks much better. That's the two scenarios for the blend case. Now let's turn to the shapes. Seals are mostly in square shape, and this is a reflection of the Chinese philosophy. Seals in the past were a credit, a symbol of honor and reliability. Therefore, they are usually in square shape. Square means being upright, that we use to describe a gentleman who has never done anything bad. And that's why the seals are mostly made square, especially for the name. There are of course more shapes like round, gourd, half-round, diamond, oval, and flat. They are made for different purposes. Like my teacher Shi Shengzhi had a J seal dating the Western Zhou dynasty with a dragon pattern like diamond. The pattern was actually an emblem of a family. The earliest seal we ever found is called Ya Xinfu. It was actually from the Shang dynasty. We have discovered many seals in that shape in bronzeware and inscriptions. So it should be a sign or even a very special family crest, just like this. I saw an exhibition last year in China Yixun Museum where there were many unusual seals. They looked very strange, and we could hardly find them in the book. They look like gourd, heart, or L-shaped. And for instance, the signatures there were seals just like flower, and which looks eccentric. And they were made by people of ethnic minorities, just like Mongolians when they had a rule over China. So that is the result of the different shapes that came from people of different nationalities, living different times. But of course, we should take square most because it is better for ancient Chinese characters. And square is the most popular shape for signature or entertainment. That's all for the shapes. Now let's take a look at the materials. And I will make this talk in three parts. That is, copper, stone, and special things. And why three parts? Because I need to go from two angles, the harness and the history. Copper first. Seals in ancient China were called Shi Yin. Copper seals started from the Shang Dynasty and have survived a very long history from the Zhou Dynasty, the Warring States, the Qin and Han dynasties, the Northern and the Southern dynasties, and the Song and Yuan dynasties. And by that time they were used as a symbol of authority and power, and they spoke for the government. Mostly by that time the seals were made of copper. And copper was actually very precious a metal, and it was very useful in the past. And then came stone. By that time, more Chinese people loved to use paper, so that kind of seals became the history. And then people started to make seals engraving a kind of art. Copper was too hard for a knife, so we began to use stone. And the earliest kind of stone was called Huaru, and it was discovered by a painter named Wang Mian. Just like many stones we are using now, the so-called Huaru stone has a mold hardness of just over 2, so which is not very difficult to do with a knife, and therefore it is very good for the art. And then we saw the prosperity. We named top 4 stones according to the region. They are Shoushan stone from Fujian, Qingtian stone and Changhua stone from Zhejiang, and the Balin stone from Inner Mongolia. The most popular Balin stone is called Jixue, or chicken blood. It was appreciated by almost everyone in the past, so it was named the top 4. And in recent years, there have been many new kind of alien stones, like the stone from Laos, which is a neighbor country of China, and this kind of stone is now very popular to seal artists. And more stones like Thai stone from Thailand, red stone from India, and golden stone from Indonesia. They are new stones over the recent decades. Now I will talk about the special materials. They are made of different things and from different sources, and they are much harder compared with the average stones. They are made of things like rhino horns, ivory, emerald, agate, jade, and even the giant clam. And in the Chinese culture, we have sayings like the 7 treasures that Buddha liked most. So many people love to get them some patterns on the surface, but they were very few because they were too hard. And in fact, they required more complex technology. Therefore, we have few access to such things. Okay, that's all for this part. If you take a close look at the seals, you will find some grids on the surface. And this is called 界格, or the frame. It is not difficult to understand. The frame is based on the characters. Seals before the Han Dynasty, like in the Qing Dynasty and the Warring State period, had frames. The frames in the Warring State period were just an outer frame, especially in Baiwen. And in the Qing Dynasty, the frames had a cross. On a flat seal used by people of lower ranks, there were outer frames with a line inside like this. But why frames? The Chinese characters in early times were not standard enough. The characters in the Han Dynasty, for instance, can be stuffed into 4 squares and they look perfect. But it was not the case in the Qing Dynasty and the Warring State time, when the Chinese characters in those periods had no standard to write. So we need a frame to have order. The frame inside disappeared in the early Western Han Dynasty, but the outer frame still remained. The frames started to totally disappear in the middle and late Western Han Dynasty. This means that the form of characters and engraving technologies have reached somewhere that we could make standards. And in all the coming dynasties later, there was no frame for seals. But now we can still find frames from modern seals because the frames are just a part of the art, and there's no limit or standard for frames set on the works. That means if you think it is necessary to have frames, just go right ahead. You have a choice, and that's your right. It is the progress in the history and a good approach for seals artists. It is a different thing from that in the Qing and Han dynasties and the Warring State period, because they had no choice, but you have. Okay, that's the frames I want to know. Okay, so now let's talk about how to use it. And let's begin with the relations with the Chinese calligraphy and painting. Now, the seal engraving is a separate form of art, and it is the same important as calligraphy, painting, and poetry in the Chinese fine art family. But in ancient time, seals played a supporting role. They were just a part of finished calligraphy and painting works. Or we can say that they were decorations. So the point was that seals should never steal the thunder of calligraphy or painting. Sometimes we will have some paintings with very large seals or that in dark red. They look quite strange. Let's take a look. Seals done by Wang Fuan and Chen Shulai are refined and neat, so they can go with some plain works done by handwriters like Qi Fen and Zhao Guchu, or painters like Wang Shitao and Fei Yan. Their works are delicate, and therefore Wang Fuan and Chen Shulai seals can be a good match. And for great artist Qi Baishi, his paintings, if going with the seals he made himself, they are just a perfect match. Or we could say that his calligraphy, painting, and seals were unified. Wu Changshui and Qi Baishi were the two greatest artists in modern times. They both have calligraphy, painting, seals, and poetry unified. And that's why they were called great masters of all times, that they were so skillful in every necessary field. So there is no good match between Qi Baishi's paintings and the Chen Shulai seal. Anyway, we have to make seals a good match to calligraphy or painting works. They have to be unified. Now let's see mistakes. Just like the works of Wang Bo in the Qing dynasty, and we find his seals were very big, just like 5 or 6 centimeters. But I don't think he did a very good job, and I have to say, from the angle of a modern artist, that's true. Because there was a role for a lot of works of calligraphy and painting in the past that seals have to be smaller than inscription. If we find a seal was bigger, it is a bad job in my eyes. The seal plays the main role on the stage. So let's take a look at its history. And all painting works over the past had a lot of seals from the emperors of the Qing dynasty, like Qianlong, Yongzheng, Jiaqing, and Daoguang. They were, in my eyes, actually damaged, a very bad damage. The painting named Dwelling in the Fuchun Mountains, for instance, gave a lot of space. But there was a very, very big seal from the Emperor Qianlong. It of course showed his power as the Emperor of China, but it is, in my eyes, aesthetically a damage. If I use smart technology to remove it, like this, it seems much better. That it presents a remote space for the beautiful landscape, and which is just what the painter wanted. Okay, that's just a few problems or mistakes that I could name in this part.